Me again. Oh, you must have had a good lunch. Just want to feel you for a minute. And let me take a minute to orient the people who are listening to these lectures on DVD. In the first lecture of this series, I talked about the path to personal responsibility. And it's a rite of passage that can arouse anger and shame. But unless your goal is set on being taken care of or becoming a victim, taking personal responsibility for your life is a necessary process. The power in personal responsibility is that external causes no longer produce internal reactions. Your personal responsibility restores your choice as to how you react to people or events. You are source. In Avatar, we call it living deliberately. In the second lecture, the path of compassion was about choosing wise beliefs and reconnecting with your heart consciousness. Head consciousness or intellect and heart consciousness need to work together. And when they separate from each other, you find the heart-dominated person who proposes marriage to death row serial killers, or the head-dominated person who argues the justification for racial genocide. They need to be balanced. Discernment from the head, compassion from the heart. And the gains that are available from the personal, awakening personal responsibility and integrating head and heart consciousness are priceless. I mean, there are inner journeys that require honesty and determination, but they're journeys that we all have to take. And now we're going to talk about the third path, which in a way is the most important path in the human drama, the path to service. And ideally, service combines personal responsibility and compassion with action. Your life is your true spiritual path. And being of service is the secret to how you make progress on that path. Now, the good news is that the path of service is exciting, challenging, and it's rewarding. And this is the frosting on life's cake. Service takes you beyond any mental nirvana, and its rewards are incredible, amazing, unbelievable. And I know I shouldn't use that word around avatars, but you're just not going to believe how profoundly rewarding the giving of selfless help can be. Something very high and spiritual and mystical within us is born when we help, even if it's at the cost of self-sacrifice. And awakening this viewpoint is something like jumping into a cold ocean. But after the complaints and the protest, it becomes clear that service to others is what we were born for. This is the front line of life. And service makes our existence valuable. I see that some of you are thinking, okay, Harry, if that's the good news, what's the bad news? Here's the downside. The path of service is so alluring and it's so genetically inherent in our race that some people embrace it before knowing anything about personal responsibility or compassion. And that makes it potentially dangerous. The instinctive hunger to serve, to be assigned a duty, and to commit to it at whatever cost is so strongly ingrained in our species that it overrides our common sense. The terrorist who willingly straps a bomb to his body is caught up in fanatical service, but is completely numb to personal responsibility and compassion. Vengeance has hijacked the suicide bomber's desire to be of service. And unscrupulous leaders intent on control and domination have taken advantage of the desire to serve and marched millions of young soldiers off to kill each other. And they die gallantly, but stupidly, in service to this or that belief, or because of some national insult, or over a piece of contested real estate. War is an exploitation of the desire to be of service. And it ruins the lives of individuals whose sense of personal responsibility and compassion are either undeveloped or they have been suppressed by indoctrination. So any individual who skips over the personal responsibility and compassion elements and rushes into service for a cause is at considerable risk for disappointment, exploitation, or worse. Problems inevitably arise when moral responsibility is asked to take second place to succeeding or completing a mission. And this applies to individuals, it applies to societies, it applies to whole nations. Service is an action, and all actions have consequences, cause and effect. And acting without responsibility for the consequences is a suitable definition for stupid. You know, it's what a machine does. It's not what a human being should do. And for a long time, a major segment of Earth's population have been coaxed or forced to engage in services that are destructive, ill-advised, and ultimately self-sabotaging. When you read your newspaper, watch your TV, you will see people striving for things that they don't need, hurting others for things that they really don't want, and following paths that in the end may kill us all. So that's the bad news about this inner desire that we have to be of service. Without harnessing it to personal responsibility and compassion, it's subject to being manipulated toward destructive ends. So the solution to shaping this powerful dynamic into something that benefits our species, rather than destroying it, is to encourage the inner journeys that increase personal responsibility and compassion. And you do that by making more avatars, masters, and wizards. Do you see how important that is? In a real sense, the path to personal responsibility and the path to compassion are prerequisites for service to others. And the best service to others that you can deliver is to increase their personal responsibility and compassion. This is not just a circular process. It's an ever-widening spiral that will eventually define an enlightened planetary civilization. Somebody will declare a war and nobody will show up. This is the reason that we keep growing. We're using our free attention to free more attention. And I think it's safe to assume that everyone in this room has achieved a high degree of personal responsibility and is well along in the process of integrating head and heart consciousness. So it's time to get busy serving somebody. Yes, indeed, you're going to have to serve somebody. Well, it may be the devil, or it may be the Lord, but you're going to have to serve somebody.
Serve somebody.
Yes, you're going to have to serve somebody.
Serve somebody.
Well, it may be the devil, or it may be the Lord, but you're going to have to serve somebody.
Serve somebody.
My apologies to Bob Dylan. If you look up the derivation of the word serve in a good unabridged dictionary, you'll find this. Serve evolved from the word deserve. I mean, the English commoner had a habit of dropping off the first syllable of a word. So instead of saying had a habit, they would say add a bit. And when they said the word deserve, meaning to be worthy of something, they would just say serve. So at the root of service is the idea that the person, organization, or country that you're supporting is deserving and worthy. In the Middle Ages, this determination was easy. You know, it was based on a person's condition of birth or performance of noble deed. And the code of chivalry, which was followed by the medieval knights and the royal gentlemen, were instructions as to who should and who should not be served. And this began the enforcement of codes and laws requiring that people serve certain parties, and this is the beginning of indoctrination. And of course, it's also the end of personal responsibility and compassion. Chivalry died a deserved death, but its faults were passed on to future generations. Military generals replaced knights and kings, and the intention to unconditionally defeat their enemies made compassion a weakness. And coming into the 20th century, compassion was replaced by the rules of engagement, which instructed troops as to how much force they could use. So personal responsibility was reduced to following orders. And self-restraint in obeying destructive orders was considered insubordination or treason. During the reign of terror in France in the late 18th century, executioners who were ordered to kill prisoners were forbidden to make eye contact. Because if they made eye contact with their victims, they might later feel remorse. So in order to get a sane person to perform a violent or a destructive act, personal responsibility must be made subservient to official orders. And morality suddenly takes on as an Orwellian character, you know. Thou shalt not kill unless ordered to do so. You know? And the justification for all evil deeds becomes, I was only following orders. As an aside here, nobody has officially asked me to amend the Ten Commandments. But if they did, the 11th commandment would be, thou shalt eat what you kill. Handle a lot. So do you see the problem? It grew first from a deterioration and then later an indoctrinated repression of personal responsibility and compassion. These are qualities that we must restore if we're to survive as a species. And you're not the first group to understand the problem, but you can count yourselves among the few groups who have ever undertaken to do anything more than talk about it. I'll give you a hand for that. The good works and service that you contribute as an avatar master do not require justification. You don't need to make up a reason for why you do them. The only question that needs to be asked is, are the actions that we are engaged in improving people's personal responsibility and compassion? And an avatar master will have no problem answering yes to that question. Forgiveness and kindness awaken compassion. Confession and goodwill increase personal responsibility. Yes, you're going to have to serve somebody.
Serve somebody.
Well, it may be the devil or it may be the Lord, but you're going to have to serve somebody.
Serve somebody.
What a great song. By one of the best poets of our generation. There are two broad categories of service: service to self and service to others. And beyond showing some rational care for self, service is mostly concerned with actions that other people, people of goodwill, will find valuable. You know what the best thing about service to others are? Two best things. One, we can do it together. You know? And two, we can do it for each other. Right? Mutual support builds powerful teams. And people who only serve themselves end up poor, alone, and unhappy. Because someone who only serves him or herself is serving an unworthy person. Here's the unconscious computation. Is a selfish person worthy of service? No. So service to self is a weak motivation and produces very little of value. And it will come as no surprise that drug addicts and criminals and the insane are self-absorbed and care very little for anybody else. And their road to recovery begins the day that they hit rock bottom. And if you only delay their fall, you may not be helping them. I mean, this is tough love, but sacrificing yourself for people who are not ready to change is not a good idea. And there are many people with good qualities who are struggling with life and who would benefit from your services. Discernment is the head's contribution to the heart's compassion. And without discernment, service to the unworthy quickly becomes exhaustion, and the result is no one is served. So sometimes it's necessary to do a sort of reverse triage and help those who only need a little attention and direction rather than waste your help on a hopeless cause. And creating an EPC requires that we employ our efforts strategically. Service to others from the head is smart business. Service to others from the heart is an expression of care and love. And when you combine these, your service takes on the quality of leadership. Service to others is the core duty of any position of leadership. And if you're not actually in charge, you can at least be a good example for others to emulate. A psychologist from the University of Chicago recently wrote a book about the contagion of behavior in social networks. He discovered that people's behavior not only affected the people they were around, but affected the people around the people they were around, and also affected the people around the people who were around the people who were around the people. So setting a good example has 3 levels of influence. And that's more power than a lot of leaders have. And the people who incorporate personal responsibility and compassion into their lives will produce valuable products and services that will benefit deserving people. Helping people with good qualities and contributing to important social goals is smart, you know. Do it and you will find more energy, more excitement, and more joy than in anything else in life. And I'm not the first one to observe this. One of the maxims taught by the Church of Latter-day Saints is that those who live only for themselves eventually shrivel up and die, while those who lose themselves in service to others grow and flourish. And even the 4-H youth organization, which is run by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, teaches finding oneself begins with losing oneself in the service to others. Unfortunately, there is no mention of compassion or personal responsibility, but they do understand the desire to serve. Mother Teresa, who founded the Christian Missionaries of Charity, left us this wisdom in a poem. The fruit of silence is prayer. The fruit of prayer is faith. The fruit of faith is love. The fruit of love is service. And the fruit of service is peace. And one of the basic tenets of Buddhism says, all suffering comes from the wish for one's own happiness. And Jesus Christ taught, one cannot serve God without simultaneously serving one's neighbor. So your primary of service, I am contributing to the creation of an enlightened planetary civilization, is putting into action some very old wisdom. Personal responsibility, compassion, and service to people of goodwill are the cornerstones of Avatar. And increase them in proportion to each other, and the seeds you plant will grow. And I know in my heart that future generations will thank you, and I also thank you. And at the beginning of these Path lectures, I set out to clarify some of the basic theory and the intention behind the Avatar materials. And I hope, if even between the lines, I've accomplished that in some small way. So thank you for listening and supporting me. Have a great day.